Hello and welcome to another managerial special from the Honest Football Podcast. I'm Craig Savage and with me as always is Mr. Daniel Cody. Today we are talking about the reappointment of Grant McCann at Peterborough United. He returns for his second stint in charge of the Posh following the resignation of Darren Ferguson. So the Grant McCann statement came through as follows. Peterborough United are delighted to confirm Grant McCann has been appointed as the club's new first team manager, pending a 2.5-year contract at the Western Home Stadium. Following the resignation of Darren Ferguson on Sunday, the club have moved quickly to secure the services of McCann, who departed Hull City earlier this month, despite the successive victories in the Sky Bet Championship. Prior to his departure, McCann had led the Tigers to 6 wins from 11 matches. McCann will be assisted at Posh by Cliff Byrne, a former teammate at Scunthorpe United and a long-term number 2 of the 41-year-old. McCann cut his teeth into management at the Western Home Stadium before leading Doncaster into the League One playoffs and then masterminded a league title for Hull in their first in 55 years. First of all, let's get to Darren Ferguson's resignation. He resigned after the late defeat against Derby County. Did you see that coming?
No, quite simply no. I think you can see the disappointment of the 4 results prior, the defeat to Derby, the draw in the midweek against Reading, not scoring against the joint worst defence in the league at the time, and the defeats even before that against Preston and Cardiff. There weren't many signs that Peterborough were going in the right direction. And you've got to bear in mind at the same time that Barnsley and Derby and even Reading now starting to pick up results. You can understand why there was maybe that feeling of, I don't think I can do this. But equally, I was still really surprised. I still think he was the best man for the job. I think we have to get into a delicate balance as fans here because there were a few murmurings about him in the weeks prior and how Peterborough were performing. And we know they had the worst defence in the league. They were woeful away from home. We've talked about that countless times on the predictions. But let's be honest, Peterborough being in the Championship, as it is for a few clubs, our club, Luton Town being one of them, it's overachieving. And if he hadn't have brought them up last year and they were up in the top 6 of League One this season, he wouldn't feel the need to resign and there wouldn't be talk about him going. The fact that he's come up to the Championship and given that extra hope maybe has created a false optimism, he's been a downfall of his own overachievement, basically, because Peterborough being in the Championship is a great achievement on the budget they've got. They have got one of the 3 smallest budgets in the league. So I'm not surprised to see them down there. I was surprised he went when he did. They've got a massive cup tie around the corner. They've got a big game with Hull this weekend at home, which obviously is quite poetic for Grant McCann. We'll get onto that later. But I still thought he was the right man. And I still think they had a slight chance, albeit a slim one.
Do you think he felt after that Derby game that's how far I can go?
Maybe. But I think at the start of the season, the remit wouldn't have been, you have to stay up or you get the sack. I think he would have kept his job if they'd gone down. And I think they would have been big promotion contenders with him in charge next year. We've seen that countless times before. And obviously it was his 3rd stint at the club. He's had a great win percentage in all of them. And I think he's potentially, from the outside, it looks like maybe he's pulled the trigger on his time at the club a bit too soon, resigning. But it takes a strong person to resign rather than wait to get sacked or take the financial rewards or whatever comes with losing your contract. And if he in his head felt he couldn't take them any further, then it is ultimately the right decision, because to survive in the Championship and compete in the Championship, you've got to be beyond 100% invested.
It's weird that he did make that call to resign because he did sign a new contract early in the season.
Well, yeah, and that was our initial surprise to it, wasn't it? He'd signed a long-term deal. He was looking pretty good. They were competing well in the Championship, particularly at home. And I don't really know what's changed so much. Obviously, in the Cup, they've done well. They've got a massive game against Manchester City next week. I mean, the scoreline probably won't be pretty, but it's a wonderful occasion for the club. And they've still got some games like Hull this weekend against sides they could have got a result against and could have scared some teams. But ultimately, you can't beat what's in your own head. And if he's saying he wasn't the right man for the job anymore, then he's made the right decision to go. As much as from the outside, it looked like he was the best man for the job.
But Peterborough do what Peterborough do. They go back to their old previous managers, and they have done that with Grant McCann. So it's his second stint in charge. And his win record in that first stint was 39%, with over 104 games. So considering he was a free agent, this kind of made sense.
Yeah, obviously it was a bit of a weird first stint. He had a solid first season. He got offered a big contract. I think he got a 4-year contract at the time and then was sacked towards the end of that season. And they hadn't won in 7 when he left. He didn't leave on the greatest terms, but Peterborough, look, the way they're run, it wouldn't surprise you if Grant McCann, I mean, the favourites for the job were Grant McCann and Steve Evans, 2 former managers. Darren Ferguson will be the favourite next time the job comes up, however far down the line that is. It's the way Peterborough run. They have a very clear philosophy. They keep people in who know the club well, and they keep the community on side too. You've got to say with Grant McCann, though, it's a slightly different situation because he left his last job on a big high, which was 2 big wins with Hull City. Obviously, was not sacked for his performances on the pitch, which is unusual for a manager in this day and age. He was sacked because a new owner came in and wanted to go down a completely different route. And time will tell if that's the right decision or not. But the fact that he's coming back in and the fact that his first game is at home to Hull City, I mean, we'll get to it in the prediction show later today, but there could be some beautiful poetry here. But ultimately, we talked about this with the Reading one last week, Craig. There's not many great candidates about now at that bottom end of the Championship. And going back to Grant McCann, a manager who, as it stood, was keeping a club up in the Championship. If they do go down, which looks fairly likely, he won League One last season. There's probably not a better candidate of those available, and someone who knows the club too.
Yeah, obviously a previous play. He also got them up when he was playing to the Championship when they were in League One. They won that game at Old Trafford against Huddersfield. How do you see Peterborough doing? Obviously, the big game against Hull to start with, and then if you look at the other fixtures, Man City's a free hit regardless, and then after that, away to Huddersfield, away to Bournemouth, and then home games against Stoke and Swansea.
Yeah, let's be honest, it's the home form largely that's going to decide it. Although if you look at the end of the season, like the last game's Blackpool at home, or a couple of weeks before that in the Easter break, they've got Barnsley away. There's still big games to go, and there's still a chance to turn it around. The problem is we're seeing a little bit of a gap emerge from the bottom 3 to the rest now. They need to beat Hull to drag them back into it. Reading need to start dropping points again for them to stay in it. Otherwise, I think Peterborough's race is probably run. And we all know what the biggest problem is with Peterborough. They've got a shocking defensive record in the Championship, the worst one about. And it's going to be an interesting wait to see how this ties up because Grant McCann's whole side, if anything, were accused of being too defensive and taking clean sheets, but at the expense of their attacking play. Peterborough side that can't keep clean sheets, bar that one Reading game last week. So his priority is to shore up the defence, and coming in as a manager with confidence. You even mentioned in that statement, he mentioned that the last 2 games he managed for Hull were clean sheets. That's clearly something important to them. Whether they can score enough goals then as well. Jack Marriott got back on the score sheet in midweek, the game managed by Matty Everington. They've got good strikers at the club. It's whether they can be defensively sure enough and still create those chances. That I'm not sure of, but it gives them a chance, and I think he was the best manager of those available.
Let's get to prediction for the future. Do you see, 1, if Peterborough survive, and 2, how do you think if he doesn't survive in the Championship, do you expect him to be up there in League One next season?
In terms of surviving this year, for me, no, I don't think they will. Obviously, you've got Derby down there in their false position because of the masses of points deductions. Barnsley are basically the form team of the bottom 3 at the minute, which is ironic, 2 wins out of 3. It boils down, I'm going to put it very simply. If they don't beat Hull this weekend, I think they're down, unfortunately. Next season, if they go down as I think they probably will, I think they'll be up and in and around there. But we've got to bear in mind, and we've said it all of this season, some of the casualties in League One managerial, it's probably the toughest League One ever. There's so many massive reputation clubs that have fallen for either financial reasons, mismanagement on the recruitment, going through the manager merry-go-round, whatever it may be. You've got realistically 13 or 14 teams that think they can get in the top 6 in League One. And it's probably as strong as the bottom half of the Championship, if not maybe slightly stronger. So it's too difficult to say they're going to be big contenders to come straight back up. They'll be in and around the mix. But again, even if they go down to League One next summer, on reputation, on size of club and size of budget, they're not one of the top 6 in that league. And that would apply to a number of teams in the Championship. So they are a victim of their own overachievement, Peterborough. They've recruited well over the years and they've always managed to exceed expectations and exceed their budget. But I think it will be too much for them this year. And I think playoffs would be the maximum for them next year. I don't see them being in the top two. But Grant McCann is still the right man for it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like I got that similar mould to like a Wickham. And that's not being disrespectful to Wickham and to Peterborough. It's just because if we're saying next season, if they do get relegated from the Championship, look at Wickham at the moment in League One. They're still in that playoffs, considering the teams are the big teams around them, and you have to give Wickham a lot of credit because they could have just folded and feel a bit hard done by that they didn't get. They did get relegated last season. So to be fair, where they are right now is I think it's a brilliant achievement for them, and I can see Peterborough probably doing the same way. Grant McCann knows League One. He won the league title last season with Hull. Let's be honest. So it's still positive in a way for Peterborough. Darren McCann, it's not a stupid man. He knows how to run a club. I think he's been an excellent chairman. And he's very honest to what he has to say. He wouldn't make disappointment if he didn't trust the man. And he's already had him before, and he knows what he can do. So I think this is a good appointment. It's a solid one. It's a safe one, and I think they need to look at the bigger picture. Obviously, he'll try and survive in this league, but I think they can go again next season and challenge it again.
And realistically, Craig, just to say, I mean, there were a couple of mentions of people like Warnock and McCarthy and that, the usual merry-go-round. But for clubs like Peterborough, and our club Luton Town have been in that bracket as well, they're not within our budget. They want big sums of money. You're taking a massive gamble. And, as Luton fans, we know what it's like to be a small fish in the pond and get the teams like Luton, the teams like Peterborough every week. But they're a well-run club, and ultimately relegation isn't going to be breaking for them, as it will probably be for a Reading or a Derby, who have got financial ruin in the background. For Peterborough, they're a well-run club. The chairman looks after things well. I know there's been a bit of talk about him changing because he's involved in the recruitment team and maybe stepping away from that. But regardless, whether it's relegation or not this year, Peterborough, they've got a stable and strong future. And that's all you can ask for as a club, looking at some of the others in the Championship in the next few years.
The future is bright for Peterborough. It's not to be disappointed on. Like, considering the other managerial appointments that we've seen this season, it's been realistic. I think because of who we support, and as you said, small budget and all that stuff, it's been more realistic rather than, like, for example, like a Forest or a Middlesbrough. No, we need to get there. We need to get there, rather than people to, oh, no, man, we got promoted last season. It was a great achievement. Let's calm ourselves down. The football hasn't been great.
And they still sold Dembele in January. They're still a selling club, like many in the Championship are. And look, I think they're in a good position and they're competing well, given the budget they have. And look, if they win at the weekend, Reading and Hull, they might be catchable just yet. And let's finish on this. If Grant McCann keeps Peterborough up at the expense of Hull, there's going to be some story to tell at the end of that, isn't there?
Absolutely. Let's have your thoughts on the appointment of Grant McCann at Peterborough and give us your predictions for his tenure in charge. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Honest Football Podcast, and you can follow us on Twitter at Honest Football 3. And we'll see you next time.